So, talking then about this whole idea of helping, being part of the family, right? You had mentioned that you said, hey, I really like incorporating. That's a joy for me is getting to learn about the families, who we serve, getting to know their kids, and so on. And that kind of reminded me a little bit about this whole idea of generational wealth, and before, I think, our grandparents, it was kind of for the majority of society, it was like make enough to retire and that's it, right? And then you hope you pass away
Yeah.
with your last dollar in your hand. And now
Yeah.
I think because there's so much more education and we're getting smarter and smarter and better and have more information, it's not so
hmm
much necessarily, hey, let's take care of mom and dad. Then you start to see that families have an opportunity to build something bigger than they are.
Yeah.
And so, what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's one of the amazing things that we are able to do because I think a lot of people, even though maybe they might be successful, what have you, one of the ways that we can be helpful in this whole relationship is be a transitioner of the conversation and help people bring that conversation to their kids. Because a lot of older parents, I guess you'd say in general, maybe don't know how to bring that conversation to their kids or know when that might be a right time to start bringing up to their kids. But I mean, man, if you start good little, even if it's a piggy bank at a young age, saving habits and investing, I mean, thinking about educating people on custodial accounts. I mean, think of the difference if your kids didn't start investing until they had a sustainable job, till they were 20, 25, 30, and then they were retiring at 65, or they had a small nest egg, even if it was something inconsequential to the overall net worth of the family, that they had started investing at age 2 or 5. I mean, you get an extra 20 or 30 years of compounding interest, even if it's a small amount of money, to really build those habits and bring awareness to it. As I was talking about in one of our other podcasts, I had a friend that kind of I was investing for the first time with. And one of the cool things that he educated me on, is his grandparents taught him about investing. They were
That's awesome.
teaching him to invest his own college fund at the age of like 15, 18, not, the whole thing, but having involvement in it. Hey, like, is this a company that you think's really interesting? And just having that knowledge at an early age, he went on to having a great passion for it. He's in investment banking now. And those foundational conversations from his grandparents to his parents that he was able to use at a younger age. Not only did he find a passion for it, it really set him up financially in a much better way than pretty much anyone else out there where people are always waiting till is it the right time, or they have hesitation because they feel like they don't know what they're doing. Maybe there's too much information out there, where that's the kind of the ideas that I feel like we get in our heads once we become adults. Once there's bills and things that you feel that need to take priority paying or what have you,
Yeah.
instead of potentially saving for yourself. But having that understanding at a young age that your parents taught you, along with everything else that they've taught you, that's really important.
Well, and
Essentially
I
paying yourself
think
first.
and I think what you said is having them engaged at a very early age, and I think that's
Yeah.
super important. You're right. I love what you said about that. Is like bringing them in on the conversation. Now that doesn't mean
Yeah.
exposing to mom and dad. 'Cause I know that's always a fear of like they don't need to know everything. But the point
Yeah.
is bringing them in and just saying, "Hey, let's look at a college fund. Let's look at a stock. Oh, you like Disney?
Yeah.
Okay, or you like something that's
Yeah.
relatable that they can say, okay, I get." And then they're
That's
looking at an
right.
actual statement. They're seeing values, and some months they go up, some months they go down. So bringing them in engagement with them in having these conversations of, hey, let's look at this. Here's your stock, and you don't even have to own it. You can follow it on websites and so on, and seeing, hey,
Yeah.
here's how it went up, here's where it went down a little bit. And so when they get to that point where hopefully they're learning a little bit of the book side, the education side of this, is now relatable. It's now
Yeah.
like real. It's now, oh, yeah, I remember that. I know how this works. And so I think having that in that conversation, I always feel so proud of the parents when they have a
Yeah.
desire to do this.
Not
Time
too many
for our
do.
kids. They don't know how to, and that's where we've really tried to
Hmm.
solicit that as much as possible of, hey, let's sit down with the
That's right.
kids when they're ready. We rely on the parents on when that maturity level is, but let's sit down with them. Let's give them basic understandings of what these things are, how it works, give them an opportunity to ask questions. And, it's no surprise that at some point kids don't want to listen to their parents. They want to listen to somebody else. It can be the same
That's right.
message, a different messenger.
They think it's cooler coming from us instead of mom and dad.
But the point is with all that is now we set them up for success, as much as we. And so that is really the start of generational wealth, where it's making sure the kids can start that at a very young age. They teach those same things now to their kids. Those kids
Yep.
hopefully continue to pass that down, and it can really be in that waterfall effect that I talked about earlier.
I mean, those conversations early on are impactful to the kids, to the parents. It takes the pressure off the parents, which is they can kind of just transition that to somebody else. Yeah, and I think it's really cool too, just to see how many teenagers or young adults really find it really interesting.
Yeah,
Just the whole stock market aspect and growing.
and what's fascinating is I have found so, we think of somebody that has a normal job or whatever, and then you think of somebody that has substantial amount of wealth, and you think, oh man, they must
Mhm.
know everything, or they've got this, or they know how to do this. And the fascinating part is at the end of the day, we're all human. And so even I've seen
Hmm.
personally and in other cases where people with significant wealth don't know how to handle those conversations with their kids. It's a very
Totally.
different conversation. The wall is still there, you know, and
Yeah.
they don't know really how
Yeah.
to have that. So on one end, you say, okay, well, let them worry about it. We're not going to have that conversation. They can figure it out. On the other hand, on the other side of the spectrum, you have, I want to shield them because I'm afraid, if they know the situation too much, then they might develop bad habits or they might become their own worst
Yeah.
enemy. And so without education on either side, it doesn't do anyone good. And I think
Yeah. You're just in a
the
stalemate, not doing anything.
and so I think that's what I remember watching this documentary a couple years ago, and it talked about this problem of these teenagers growing up and thinking, yeah, we knew we had some money, but then they'd go and look in Fortune magazine and see their last name is one of the wealthiest families in America, and they're like, whoa, wait a minute, hold on. This documentary talked all about, hey, why aren't we talking about this? The parents, as parents are, you and I know that we were fearful of, hey, we want to protect the kids and we don't want them to develop bad habits and so on. There is a way to have a conversation a very healthy way too. They came from money. The dad was first patriarch, first generational wealth, created the wealth, and never talked about money, just wanted not to be a point of conversation because they thought it would ruin them. The kid spoke up and said, I'll never not live with money, but I need to know how to live with it, not how to learn to live without it, because we'll always have it, because that's what
Yeah.
first generation
How to be
does.
good
They're the most
stewards.
frugal. The child at that time was like, hey, I'm always going to have this. So learning to not live with money is not my issue. Learning to live with money
Yeah.
is what I need help with. What is the right thing to do? Like, how do I steward this?
Yeah. Manage it
And
properly. Live within my
mm-hmm,
means, even though your means may be bigger than most people's. I mean, you see it every day with people, athletes, what have you, where, yeah, they made 50, $100 million, but they declared bankruptcy. I mean, you see lottery winners all
yeah.
the time. They just spend all the money that they get because they don't know how to steward that wealth properly.
So funny because there's this proverb that basically says, shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations. And the whole idea of this and the story behind that is, you have the first generation that didn't come from money, but they knew
Uh-huh.
hard work. They knew how to take certain business risks. They knew how to be an entrepreneur. But they knew how to be very, very disciplined. And so then they create the wealth typically. The second generation, well, they grew up with that, right? Because they got to see the fruits of all the labor that, mom and dad created when they weren't around. So the second generation is able to go to
Yeah.
all these things that first generation didn't go to: nice schools, good education, being able to have resources. And so they get accustomed to that because they don't know all the other attributes that went into that. So you have the
Yeah.
second generation growing up with the sense of, or an a mentality of spending money. And then by that
Yeah.
time, the third generation's coming up. Again, nothing's passed down from the first generation, and they spent all the money and they're back to shirt sleeves again. And so
Yep.
for me, I've always kind of felt like I'm on this mission to say, listen, if you have and you've built something, that attributes to a good amount of wealth and you've been, very blessed, let's keep that as far as not keep it, but let's steward that well in a way that's meaningful, not spending it frivolously in things where it ultimately doesn't bring you happiness. And
That's
that to
right.
me has been one thing that I've recognized that people need help on more than anything is, okay, how do you steward money? And so we talk a lot
Yeah.
about values. We talk a lot about dreams and philanthropic causes, and what's important. Is family important? Is security important? Are experiences important to you? And that's always the fun
Hmm.
part.
Well, it can, once people start making good money for the first time, it can get, you know, out of hand in some cases. And you want to put, I mean, that's really why we put a good plan together, is because you want to put kind of barriers on either side. Obviously, having money is nice and there's amazing things you can do with it, but there's a fine line between, making good money and then spending too much money. You don't
Or
want to get yourself into a,
spending in a way that doesn't really serve your values, your morals, your spiritual beliefs, your religious beliefs. And so I think that's where they call it, the difference between old money and new money, right? Old money is very comfortable. They don't spend. They're not frivolous, where new money is
yeah,
spend, spend, spend because it's all exciting. It's something you've never had.
yep,
So, for us, it's great because we try to be those, sometimes we're a counselor, sometimes we're a teacher, sometimes we're a motivator.
that's,
Let's go back to our foundation of what we're trying to accomplish, the bigger picture, and really guiding them
yep.
in that journey.
Watching out for that lifestyle creep. That's the hard one.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that's a great finishing topic of generational wealth.
So yeah, we're going to discuss a lot more topics. Something that's hopefully relatable to a lot of folks. And as always, we're here to help. If you have any questions, please give us a call. But we just appreciate everybody joining us at the Lighthouse Wealth Group Spotlight Podcast. Thank y'all.
We'll see you next time.